This fatty is so clumsy that when he tried out his family sword, he stabbed himself with it. He barely survives, and something in him changes completely. He stops eating constantly, and instead takes up training. The fatty starts running all day long and works on his mana core whenever he takes a break. Then he trains day and night, swinging his wooden sword over and over again. He ignores his fatigue, and even when the instructor tells him to stop, he doesn't listen. He keeps going again and again even when it rains, until his hands are rubbed raw and bleeding, and his wooden sword finally breaks. In just a month, he hones every movement to perfection. Looking at his worn hands, he's completely satisfied with the result. But the human body has its limits, and he eventually loses consciousness from exhaustion. Still, he keeps training, and after some time he isn't fat anymore. And even his swordmaster is shocked by his skills with sword and mana techniques. So what made this fatty change so much? Well, the thing is, his body is now possessed by the soul from sword he stabbed himself with, and it isn't a simple sword at all. That's the story from the perspective of a hero who was reincarnated as a sword. Throughout many centuries, he was wielded by many legends, but the most significant bond this sword ever shared was with one person only, a hero named Leonberg. Despite this man's humble background as a peasant, he earned the title of Sword Saint through sheer grit and wielded this magnificent blade. Even though the sword had passed through the hands of many, Leonberg was the only one he considered a true companion of the heart. They pilgrimaged from one continent to another, spending decades traversing and cleansing the world together. Eventually, the day to face the final boss arrived, the White Dragon of the Frost Mountains. It was a colossal silver-scaled beast that squeezed every ounce of strength out of Leonberg before he managed to slay it. Alas, while they restored peace to the kingdom, an achievement that granted Leonberg the opportunity to ascend as sovereign of the nation, the victory came at a cost. With the world once again seeing sunshine and roses, the sword was finally put to rest after centuries of slaughtering monsters. It was passed down through Leonberg's bloodline for generations, but no successor could fill the void left in the sword's heart by his beloved friend. With every prince that came in subsequent generations, they grew increasingly incompetent and lackluster. This mediocrity hit its peak when the sword was passed down to a good-for-nothing obese youth. The moment the fat prince swings his rightful weapon, the sword is appalled. This pig is an ill-mannered brat with zero knowledge of how to wield a blade. The sword quickly runs a stat check, and a system window displays everything he needs to know about the boy. His name is Adrian Leonberg, a 16-year-old obese kid who is literally nerfed sevenfold if I'm counting correctly. In simpler terms, his traits describe him perfectly as a useless gooner with little to no stamina. Plus, he suffers from a mana sensitivity disorder. Even though the kid's surname clearly marks him as Leonberg's descendant, his pathetic stats suggest otherwise. The boy is so weak he has trouble just lifting the sword upright. He is all bark and no bite, and his constant proclamations are getting on the sword's nerves. After reciting the name of the saint hero, the kid puts every ounce of strength into lifting the blade and starts swinging the weapon aimlessly, terrifying everyone standing around him. As this fat sack of lard charges blindly, the servants barely have time to scatter to avoid catching a stray hit. The stupidity reaches its peak when the clumsy prince stumbles over his own feet and accidentally ends up pointing the sharp blade right at his own belly. As he falls, there is no plot twist. He actually ends up getting impaled by his own sword. Everyone standing there is horrified at the tragedy and runs to support the young prince. But let's not forget about the sword, who is having the worst time right now. However, I guess the kid's death isn't that bad after all. Let me explain why. Adrian failed to inherit any traits that would make him look like a true descendant of Leonberg. He stood out only for the wrong reasons. He was arrogant despite his lack of talent, and his greed knew no bounds. Long story short, he was the true embodiment of the 7 deadly sins, whether it was lust, laziness, gluttony, or greed. If he were to become the next successor to rule, there would be no kingdom left to rule over. Yet that clumsy mistake that got him impaled is about to change the kingdom's fate for good. The sword ends up possessing the body of the prince the moment it becomes soulless. Within just a few days, the staff working in the castle start to notice an unprecedented, drastic shift in the kid's personality. He is acting as if he has lost his memories. The kid even refuses to recall or acknowledge the master who has always put up with his nonsense. Soon the king arrives in the chamber to meet his son. Just by looking, it's pretty obvious to the arrogant sword that this man must be the brat's father. He is somewhat surprised that the king doesn't look as pathetic as his son. Anyhow, the father finds his son's lack of manners quite disturbing, as Adrian didn't even bother to greet him. Adrian's teacher tries to shield his disciple, claiming the kid is going through some memory loss issues. The royal knights are shocked by the news and suggest having the in-house royal physicians check the prince's mental state. A while later, once the physician is done examining the boy, he concludes that there are no physical brain injuries, though he argues that trauma or psychological shock must have caused this state of amnesia. It looks like the king isn't totally convinced, and Adrian can sense his majesty's skepticism from afar. The king lets him know that simply claiming to forget all the wrongdoings Idrian has committed won't undo them. Even if Idrian has lost all his past experiences, it means he has also lost every lesson he should have learned from his mistakes. Just the thought that they are literally back to square one regarding Idrian's growth is infuriating. After letting his son know how pathetic he is, His Majesty proceeds to leave the chamber. Meanwhile, Idrian, the sword within Idrian's body, is not enjoying how he is being treated in the slightest. This makes him wonder just how messed up this kid must have been to build this kind of reputation. Luckily for him, there is at least one person treating him like a human, his dear mother, who adores her useless son down to the last drop. Hell, she even finds this sack of potatoes to be quite a handsome fellow. The doting mother is just happy to have her son back. Only God knows how she would have lived without him. The sword could only feel pity for the mother, mourning a son who is already pushing up daisies. Night descends, and the happy mother finally decides to retreat to her chamber. Seeing her so joyful forces the sword to reflect on the reality of his situation. He literally ended up killing the descendant of his friend, even though he was supposed to protect them. Then again, the sword tries to convince himself that it wasn't his fault, and crying over spilled milk won't do any good. Currently, the least he can do is utilize this chance to make things right and undo all the failures of the original Idrian. This body is fat and has nothing good going for it. With that in mind, he figures out his first course of action. Build some strength. He plans to kick off his pursuit of power by forging a mana heart within himself. Confidently, Idrian inhales and starts concentrating mana, only for it to fizzle out like nothing happened. His body clearly refuses to accept the inflow of mana. He tries again, straining as hard as he can, only to end up in failure. Idrian realizes the hard way that this body is broken beyond belief. As he drowns in sorrow, a ray of hope arrives in the form of a servant. The maid has brought a tonic sent exclusively by the queen. The tonic may not taste like much, but it will prove very potent for his incompetent body. As the maid insists he take it, she starts to dread the worst. You see, it's not the first time she has brought this tonic, and given how aggressively Idrian reacted previously, she fears history might repeat itself. But luckily for her, unlike the real, good-for-nothing Idrian who never understood the value of this imported tonic, our Idrian can clearly see that this liquid is enriched with mana. Without waiting a minute, he snatches the cup off the tray and starts chugging it down, much to the maid's surprise. Once he is done emptying the bowl, he sternly excuses the maid. With her gone, he tries to consolidate mana within his hands once again. Fortunately, the tonic he drank wasn't a hoax after all. Though the amount of mana he is capable of consolidating is still insufficient, he decides to experiment further. He quickly follows the maid who served him the tonic and asks if she has more of this fine stuff. A few days pass, and the greedy grin on Idrian's chubby face is proof enough that he has finally been successful in creating a mana heart. For him, creating a mana heart would have been child's play if it weren't for his old body. That's exactly why he forgot to take one variable into account. The mana ignited in his heart begins to inflict an astronomical amount of pain. His insides feel like they are on fire, and his chest is about to explode at any second. Yup, creating a mana heart has always been a painful process, and if he fails to brave through it and loses consciousness, he is doomed. So, the kid does the best he can to concentrate and sync himself with the mana taking over his heart. Eventually, he successfully overcomes the most grueling part of the process, and his efforts aren't without fruit. He feels proud of himself, not just because he managed to create a mana heart, but because this time, the mana heart belongs to him. In his past life, he helped his owners wield a mana heart, but this time is different, and he can barely contain his happiness. With the mana heart completed, he receives a system notification, the same kind Idrian used to send to his wielders, but this time, it is he who receives them. With one system window popping up, a barrage follows, much to our fat fella's shock. To put it simply, his weak body is still getting in the way of harnessing the full potential of the mana heart. Thus, he is allowed to use only a few cool skills out of many. For now, he can only access two authorities, Third Eye and Third Ear, and even then, he can only use these skills within a certain limit. As the names suggest, Third Eye allows him to see more clearly, while Third Ear allows him to hear a wide spectrum of frequencies. He can even hear the maids gossiping about him for all the wrong reasons. But before he can surveil the servants any further, a veil of exhaustion takes over him as the mana consumption causes him to lose his sight. Of course, Idrian doesn't appreciate these restrictions slapped on to limit his potential. Back in the day, when he was a mere sword, he had the ability to see and hear everything in all directions. But right now, he can only squeeze out barely enough mana to utilize the Third Ear and Third Eye for a brief moment. However, he is optimistic that once his overall mana capacity increases, he will be capable of performing much more than just that. While his mana capacity may be low, his appetite is equally huge, and he is currently starving. In the pursuit of power, the sword almost forgot that he is inhabiting a human body and must get used to it. A while later, he gets to see his doting mother once again, and she is far happier than we had seen her before. The source of her happiness roots from the fact that her son actually consumed every last drop of the tonic she sent. Just as she is busy giving him maternal affection, a new character comes into view. When his mother asks if he recognizes this person, Idrian brazenly denies it. While this seriously intimidating-looking man is his mother's brother, basically Idrian's uncle, the mother is hoping that her brother will help her nephew with his lost memories. However, the uncle has a different perspective on the kid's situation. The memories Idrian held weren't of any significance to begin with, so it is basically a wasted effort helping retrieve that useless collection. This crude remark makes our boy realize that this man has a deep-seated vendetta against Idrian. For now, the man can only promise one thing: to help Idrian drop his extra fat and gain some muscle. Expecting him to do anything beyond his current capabilities would be too much to ask. Well, the mother is grateful even for this much. Meanwhile, the way this dude is staring at our boy like Diddy with predatory eyes tells Indrain he is fucked, figuratively speaking. In the next scene, the poor guy is kicked hard onto the ground. The bastard is literally staring down the harmless kid like a starving wolf. He makes himself clear: Idrian isn't allowed to even breathe unless he is given permission. Only if he feels like it will he teach Idrian the family's most coveted and sacred swordsmanship. Of course, this just ticks off our fat fella beyond belief. For someone who is responsible for the success of this family, it's quite humiliating for these guys to act so ungrateful toward the very person who created their style. The enraged Idrian stands back up and vows that within 6 months, he will make the uncle acknowledge him. If he fails, he is willing to become a puppet to his uncle's whims. Consequently, if he wins, he wants his uncle to grant him a wish. Mistaking the kid's confidence for arrogance, the most arrogant man in the world immediately caves in to the kid's terms. Idrian internalizes his situation. Even though he has brazenly proclaimed victory, he knows damn well that this body is going to give him hell. Wrapping his body in mana, he begins a sprint with the intention of burning excess fat. Suddenly, the uncle notices the presence of mana within Idrian's body, which shocks him to his last brain cell. He immediately interrupts Idrian's sprint to pose a curious question. Has he already created a mana heart? My guy doesn't waste this opportunity to brag about it because he desperately wants his uncle to feel shocked. Turns out, his uncle is indeed disappointed, but not for the reason you might think. He is annoyed, wondering who suggested he go as far as to develop a mana heart. Because the harsh truth is, this is a technique reserved for low-grade, bottom-tier mercenaries only. There you go. All the confidence our boy had has been crushed with a single revelation. The shit he learned isn't worth a dime. A while later, his confidence, previously inflated like his belly, has been deflated, and bro is losing it while reflecting on his uncle's words. His uncle demonstrated his strength by forming a mana ring and striking Idrian with it. That single wipe shatters the mana our boy had been banking on so much. The technique his uncle used, namely mana chains, can be used to crush the aura generated by a mana heart. Furthermore, it is far easier and more stable to use. Even the Count Eli family, who clung to the mana heart tradition, fell into complete ruin a century ago. Now no one attempts to use the mana heart anymore. With these new revelations, Idrian is forced to retreat to learning the basic theory of mana chains. Here is a little understanding of how mana utilization is categorized. Mages often rely on mana circles, while knights weave mana chains. The rank of the knight is determined by the number of chains they can weave. The first realm is the single chain, then double chain, and it goes down until the realm of the pentachain. After absorbing the most relevant knowledge regarding this world, he realizes that his uncle wasn't bullshitting after all. He also reads a familiar keyword in the book, Altringen. Reflecting on the past, Idrian remembers a time when a man named Ernest Altringen came looking for him. That man possessed strange arts that were neither swordsmanship nor magic. This reflection puts a smirk on our boy's face, as if he has figured out what he is supposed to do next. A new day arrives with new confidence. Outside, as our boy stretches for the training ahead, his uncle arrives and inquires if he read the books he was given last night. If yes, then Idrian must have realized how stupid he was for making a mana heart. However, contrary to the senior's expectations, our boy's confidence in his mana heart has returned. In fact, it has doubled. The man confronts him, asking if he is just that dumb or trying to act obtuse. Idrian decides to let his demonstration speak for itself. He begins exuding mana and corrects his uncle, stating that different mana hearts have different working mechanisms. Predictably, his uncle doesn't take his words seriously in the slightest and figures Idrian is just acting like those stubborn runt mercenaries who are too confident in themselves. Those same mercenaries literally failed to surpass even 2 chains before succumbing to failure, though he does issue an open challenge to Idrian. If he thinks he is indeed different, then he can prove himself by defeating a double chain knight. If he does so, the uncle promises to become his guardian just like his mother wanted. Idrian, however, tries to crawl under his uncle's thick skin, wondering aloud if having his uncle as a guardian is even beneficial. This remark comes off as a serious insult to the knight's honor. He, who proclaims himself a count of the kingdom, commander of the northern army, master of the Black Lancers, and one of the 5 silver lions who serve his majesty, a knight who has woven 4 rings, a quad chain knight, will not tolerate such brazen insolence questioning his competence. The terrifying man begins releasing a horrifying amount of mana, so intense that it shatters the ground beneath his feet, just to drive his point home. He hopes this much is enough to prove his competence. Well, this man is the real deal, and Idrian is learning that the hard way. Before the uncle escalates the situation to the point of threatening the young prince's life, the knights standing nearby have no choice but to raise their weapons against the count. The stakes are high, and Idrian finally realizes that this is going to take way more effort than he had initially thought. A short while later, Idrian is lying on the floor like a bag of wheat, exasperated by the grueling cardio he is doing to lose all the unwanted fat his body loves to cling to. The arrogant image of the Count continues to surface in our boy's memories. If he fails to defeat a double-chain knight, that bastard with the smugly scarred face is going to humiliate and look down on him all his life. As our boy gets back to his room, he is suddenly greeted by the physician who had been waiting for him. While the physician does his best to smooth talk with greetings and pleasantries, the fatty wants him to cut to the chase and get to the agenda. Turns out, this man has been ordered by the queen to heal the young prince to help him recover faster. But our boy avoids that healing spell like the plague and kicks the man out of his room because he is not interested in magical healing. After all, healing magic works like time reversal. It undoes all the micro-injuries and wear and tear in the muscles, meaning his body wouldn't be able to grow naturally, and his efforts would be wasted. On a particular day, as our boy is having his meal, his big brother bursts into the dining room. Of course, the sword doesn't recognize this loudmouth, so a knight leans into his ear and fills in the blanks for him. Well, this dude is the third prince, and I can pretty much tell that he is your typical toxic manhwa brother. Even now, he is here to mock Idrian for the recent mishap when he literally impaled himself with his own sword and almost died. Of course, my guy isn't interested in responding to such obvious jabs and wants his supposed big bro to do something productive with his time. The rage-baiting brother gets rage-baited and decides to move on to the next rumor he heard. The word on the street is that Idrian made a bet with Count Belhard, and since the bet includes our boy going up against a double-chain knight, the scummy and malicious brother volunteers to be his opponent. Our boy has no idea who this dimwit asshole was. All he can think about is why the descendants of this family are all annoying. The one who mocked him just now is the third prince, Prince Giliain, known for his talent in swordsmanship. The prodigy formed 2 rings at the age of 4, so he's absolutely a force to be reckoned with. One maid comes along to interrupt the fray and reveals a bunch of letters for Idrian. Our boy has no clue why all these letters have come his way, when there wasn't any interest in him before. Suddenly, his attention catches the subject of the letters. Many of the letters are requesting a duel with the prince. Some are offering themselves to become his sparring partners. Long story short, all of these people are basically trying to plot their scheme to beat up the prince for free. Our boy is royally pissed to see the sheer audacity of these people. To help them vent their frustrations, he calls out this maid and orders her to write down all the names of the people who sent these letters. In the next scene, Bro's having a training session when suddenly, the northern commander tosses him a wooden sword, strongly believing in the idea of coaching the prince some level of swordsmanship. He doesn't want to hear the excuse of being blamed because he couldn't teach the prince. Idrian gets down to pick up the weapon, a little irked that this dude couldn't just politely hand him the sword. But right then, something happens. His entire body jolts as his muscles spasm out of nowhere. This makes Balerhard wonder if the boy has yet to receive healing magic treatment. Our boy taunts him for not knowing the reason why, even when he's a knight. After all, once you receive healing magic, the muscles merely return to their original state and refuse to grow. Balerhard agrees with that point and turns around, sharing how he wasn't trying to focus on healing magic anyway. For now, he's going to demonstrate a skill that he wants Idrian to watch with utmost attention. This technique is the kingdom's secret sword technique, one that its knights use when building their core foundation. The weapon swings with ferocity as the knight slashes in every single direction. His immaculate display of swordsmanship ends in a gorgeous spiral finish, as Balerhard leaves the prince at a loss for words. By the end of that beautiful demonstration, Idrian questions if this is truly the foundational technique for knights. Balerhard takes it as an insult and explains that training weapons lack sharpness, but it's better to stick to the basics for learning swordsmanship. Suddenly, Bro starts laughing in his teacher's face. Idrian has realized how sword mastery has evolved. The great swordsmanship that slaughtered the Mad Dragon is actually now being used as a lowly training technique. Bro's face is devastated, while his master urges him that this technique won't be enough to win him the bet. So after the basics, he could always go to another teacher. Prince Idrian rejects the idea of other swordsmanship, strongly believing that this technique would be more than enough. His words leave Balerhard slightly ticked, but ultimately he goes with Idrian's desires. Back to the training session, our boy is practicing the swing of his sword, analyzing why the Dragon Slayer technique is being treated as a lowly technique. He understands that nature is supposed to evolve in this direction, and that Balerhard's technique actually lacks the spirit of dragon slaying despite its execution. The people who rejected the mana heart eventually forgot how to breathe their own spirit into the sword, so they couldn't possibly understand the value of Dragon Slayer technique. While he's lost in his thoughts, Balorhard clashes his sword against Idrian, correcting his stance and advising him to put strength into his blade instead of his arms. He smacks the prince's belly and then his legs, forcing him to correct his posture to distribute strength equally and properly into the weapon. Idrian knows that his teacher's absolutely correct. His current body is weak as hell trying to imitate the technique. The same technique isn't supposed to be a piece of discarded trash, and he wants to prove it to the world with his own actions. More days passed as our boy's arduous training sessions continued. A month followed rigorous training as the system congratulated him on succeeding on a mission. Now, his severe obesity levels have been reduced to normal obesity, meaning his metabolism will adopt and his body will change accordingly. The trait of clumsiness is gone, and exercise will only sharpen him further. His mana capacity is growing too, as well as the disappearance of the mana sensitivity disorder trait. Idrian gains confidence with every swing, knowing that he's come a long way from a month ago. His whole mindset is to perfect his technique 1% better every day. Lost in his thoughts again, Idrian gets his sword crushed by his teacher, who had repeatedly told the boy to stop. They stand in silence under the heavy rain, as the prince's hands show signs of fatigue. Blood drips down from his bruised grip while he looks at his uncle, questioning what happened. Idrian looks back at the training dummy in front of him, how he literally slashed away both its limbs from his slash. Our boy is speechless, while Balorhard roars at him for being a fool who could have done real and reckless damage if he had a proper sword on him. Idrian's hands are full of calluses and cuts. The system awards him for his extreme concentration with a super concentration trait. This is a positive reward, and in his final thoughts before passing away from fatigue, our boy thinks that he could have been killed just now. Balorhard catches his student gazing at his face while remarking the stubbornness of the prince. In the next scene, our boy wakes up in his bed, realizing that he crashed out mid-training. He really pushed his current body beyond its limits, recalling the time when he was a sword, how he'd been perfect in every way. His users were once the nameless war hero, the swordmaster, a mercenary king, and finally even the founder of the kingdom. He'd single-handedly led wars to victory, killed countless monsters, and created a pathway for heroes to flourish. Gruhorn had always been an excellent advisor and teacher, and that's why he wanted to continue swinging his weapon until he could reach such a perfect state again, pouring all his effort into one. Still, the current body is too weak, and will lead to ruination if he doesn't rest properly. A month has gone by since he created the mana heart, and he's acquired a lump of mana during that time. Meditating, the prince prepares himself for the next level, one that his system is ready to let him access. His body can now freely access more mana in his mana heart's expansion and evolution. The same body's physical constitution also adjusted to accommodate for the mana heart, allowing physical benefits. By the end of the process, Idrian's mana heart is stimulated to success. To test it right away, he grabs his sword and makes a swing, having acquired the level of a sword learner. Now he can access the most basic level of aura too, evidenced by the flowing waves of his sword. The basics have been successfully learned. In the training session to follow, Balorhard talks about certain rumors spreading throughout the kingdom regarding the bet. Because of that, Bro is forced to train the prince even harder, though he's annoyed that Idrian isn't just hurrying up to find a partner already. The person who comes to mind is actually none other than the third son of the Empire. Aside from that, our boy knows that he can't face off a double chain warrior straight up, so he was wondering if he could fight a single chain person as a starting point. Idrian looks at Carls for an update on his task. The knight responds assuring the prince that he did exactly as he was told and sent sparring requests everywhere. However, Carls is worried why the prince is hoping to have practice sessions with all these people. The reason is simple. Every single one of these opponents all have a grudge against the annoying and arrogant prince. That's why they're intentionally using this opportunity to hurt him, but that's fine with our boy, who's already aware of their strategy. His only concern is for his uncle to act as the referee for each session. It's a simple task to make sure no one dies during the match, something that Balorhard shouldn't have any resistance doing. Days after this session, the first training match is conducted. The first challenger stares in awe of the majestic palace of the scoundrel prince. This guy's called Taylor Tailheim, and he's just the second son of a baron's ordinary family. Years ago, the bastard fat pig of a prince denounced him and ridiculed his older brother and father in front of everyone, instantly smashing his family's honor into the ground. Ever since then, the Tailheim family has lost its respect and has become a subject of ridicule. That's why he's come here to exact his revenge against the snotty prince in this fight. Shortly after, he meets the prince and greets him with utmost respect. Taylor highlights his level as an apprentice knight of the single chain, though he's doing too long of an introduction for a match that is unofficial. Our boy even cooks his ass and calls him weak, which confirms to Taylor about how arrogant this prince really is. Balorhard catches on to the young man's vitriol and hatred and orders him to compose himself as the fight hasn't even begun. Bro goes from a murder machine to a fangirl instantly after watching the northern commander stand before him. Even our boy thinks that his uncle deserves the true rank of the prince more than he does, to which Balorhard taunts him for being a shitty noble brat in the past. Anyway, Both fighters are told to set positions as the fight is to begin. The two stare the other down. Taylor is the first person to unleash his aura, acting confident with his smile as he lunges forth to punish the prince. He goes for an aerial slash, but just from a glance, Idrian criticizes several wasted movements of the apprentice knight. Casually, he ends up blocking the strike, stunning the apprentice knight with his display of a mana heart. Taylor jumps back to maintain his spacing, questioning how a mana heart is even capable of blocking a mana chain. His observation is actually correct, except for the fact that Taylor is only using a single chain, so it's not a major difference and merely makes the prince tingle. Interestingly, the spectators all start to hear a unique sound emanating from the sword, one that stuns even the boy's uncle. This phenomenon is called a sword cry. Taylor is in so much denial of the prince's capabilities that he impulsively bursts forth again. This attack is heavier than the last, but our boy defends it well. The attack turns into a proper sword clash between both fights, their blades exchanging blows as each fighter draws back. At this point, Idrian is catching up on fatigue, highlighting how mana rings are the polar opposite of mana heart. Just one confrontation just now made him feel like his mana was about to crash and backflow. At the same time, his opponent's expression is quite the sight to see. Idrian remembers Taylor's position as the second son of his family, and taunts him for being far too hard-headed in his emotions. As for our boy, he collects himself and submerges in even deeper concentration. Idrian calls for an awakened spell, as even if the sword is called magical or divine, it's part of his soul. The mana heart officially accepts his grand will as the first color is imbued over the colorless mana heart. The dormant sleeping will of the Dragon Slayer is officially summoned. Thus is the memory of the sword paired with a heart specifically designed to slaughter dragons. The skill heart of the Dragon Slayer spirals into action as Idrian transforms into a draconic state. His body is now aided by the will of the dragon as part of the Dragon Slayer's sword's powers. From a distance, the same powerless prince now looks like a manifestation of literal death as crimson aura exudes from him. Taylor is frightened by the mere sight of it, while Balorhard demands the duel to be stopped. Filled with determination, the ruthless prince rockets ahead to slaughter his opponent. In a flashback, it is revealed that the prince made a special request to his uncle to stop him if he ends up trying to kill his opponent. That's exactly what's happening right now, forcing the northern commander to sweep right in, activating a skill to pulverize the prince. The boy was launched into a wall, but at least Balorhard could stop him in time. Suddenly, the rest of the knights come to seize him from every direction, believing that his recent attack could have resulted in the prince's assassination. It's a grievous offense, but our boy quickly gets up to stop them all from annoying his teacher. It's true that he's the one who ordered Balorhard to act, except he wasn't planning on Bro to actually knock him out like that. The prince faints, and resultantly, the next time he wakes up, his mana heart is pounding from the effects. His uncle is a goddamn monster with incomparable strength, and the second he took that kind of attack head-on, the backflow took him out. The good thing? There weren't any after effects, so it's fine because he ended up winning the match too. The prince was laughing when suddenly, his master and uncle came along for an important discussion. He recalls the sight of the sword the boy used, emphasizing that he never even taught him that kind of style. The prince reveals that he divulged himself into the essence of the sword and became one with it. What bothers his uncle is that the same prince who hasn't even experienced a real fight was exerting godlike murderous intent. The essence of his so-called spirit reeks in bloodlust, though Balorhard can't disagree with it either. This comes as a shock to the prince who was fully expecting to be given a corny lecture. The northern commander scoffs, sharing that he's a soldier first, one that walks the path of winning by any means necessary. Despite his own philosophy of ruthlessness, he still takes issue with Idrian's bloodlust, as the weapon can't distinguish between friend or foe. The prince argues that he's putting in the work to fix his weaknesses, while his maternal uncle shows him interest in his development, wondering if the boy will eventually be consumed by his inner demons. After the 3 days of the sparring session, Taylor stood in defeat, while the prince thanked him for his assistance over the past few days. It's unfortunate that Taylor couldn't get his revenge, and our boy even taunts him for not being able to get what he wanted. Idrian tells his maid to bring a special present, one that he's been meaning for the Talheim family. He already knows that the old snobby prince has done terrible things to people in the past, and though this gift won't be enough, it's still something to make amends with their family. Taylor is flustered by the shift in the scoundrel prince's personality, while our boy tells him to fudge off, reflecting how he shouldn't even bother with cleaning up the mess-up of the original shitty prince. The news of the sparring session of the scoundrel prince quickly soared throughout the kingdom. People wanted warriors to go up against him and put the puny prince in his place. They all thought the first prince would suffer greatly, but even after many practice sessions, no one could hear the news of Idrian's suffering. Instead, the warriors who returned from the session actually gained a positive impression of our boy, painting the first prince as a kind and benevolent man. Their personalities completely shifted, to the point that normal citizens thought these guys were brainwashed by the royal family to stay silent. Hilariously, when this news makes its way back to our boy, it makes him enraged. The only reason these warriors weren't saying anything is because of how badly they got smoked in their fights. Adrian thought of these nobles as shitty and a waste of space, but his uncle mocks him for also fitting the same description. The first prince is fed up and looks at his recent opponent, politely threatening him to go and reveal the results of the sparring sessions this time. Our boy is hoping that this change will silence all his haters and the rumors spreading about. But the next day, even more rumors start spreading. This time people think the fat prince is fabricating the outcome of the matches to save his skin. This dude just can't stop catching L's. Refusing to focus on the nobles, he pours all his tantrums and frustrations into his training. Each swing of the prince is more ferocious than the last, cutting apart with wind with blazing mana. His mana heart is fired up full of life as he turns to Cal's to ask him about the remaining sparring partners. The knight explains that he'll be seeing his final opponent today. The first prince has already gotten to a level where apprentice knights are no match for him, but Cal's assures him that this final opponent is actually a proper knight who has mastered her sword. This same knight wasn't satisfied with her own family's techniques, and became an elite who entered the Knight Order to further hone her sword. It's an attractive description to Idrian as he welcomes the arrival of Arwen Kirgayan. The woman walks up to the battle arena, while ordinary knights recall her as the warrior of the Iron Light Knight Order. Nicknamed as the flower blooming on the cliff, the thorny rose, and even the woman who breaks the hearts of men, she is an elegant beauty with her every stride. The fact that the first prince was able to invite her attention is a praise in its own league, as the determined Arwen looks forward to her fight. The spectators? They for sure think Arwen is going to dogwalk the prince in a humiliation ritual. The Iron Lion Knights are an order that is considered an elite set of knights. The probation knight among them is Arwen, a prodigious talent whose membership is already confirmed. The question is, why would Idrian be receiving such a talented opponent? Apparently there was some kind of misunderstanding between the two of them in the past, making our boy think that the trash prince must have picked an unnecessary fight again. He asks one of his maids to recount the tale of how he looked. Flustered, she reveals that this snob actually harassed Arwen, which basically means bro is about to get a dozen backshots from Arwen for their earlier grudge. Adrian is fed up with the misdeeds of the reckless prince. We actually get to see how this fatty put his hand over her body, and she even taunted him for trying to use his knights as private property. His ego attacked, the prince exploded and called Arwen ugly. That's about how the tale goes. Completely in character for a scoundrel's interaction with a knight. Of course, with the way our boy was looking at Arwen right now, the word ugly doesn't even come to mind. She lowers herself before him to pay respect, believing he hasn't changed a bit. The prince tries to save his skin, assuring her that he's changed quite a bit. But just looking at her pissed-off expression, it's clear that he's gonna get his ass kicked in this fight. The referee and uncle, Count Balorhard, is here. He allows Arwen to introduce herself properly, and she offers her greetings as well. Balorhard urges Arwen to be careful as the mighty young prince has quite the feisty blade. Jokes aside, the match between the two is about to start as both participants take their positions. The duel officially begins, inviting determination and coldness from Arwen's stance. Meanwhile, our boy is happy to experience the skill level of a proper knight. The murderous woman blitzes into action with refined movement. The first clash is blocked by the young prince, but the mana difference is so severe that it causes a direct backflow, forcing out blood. Gorgeous yet concentrated, Arwen hammers on the offense for more punishment. Both of them swing back and forth, exchanging and clashing their blades. Our boy is being ragdolled around, giving Arwen complete control over the fight. She comes around for a definitive strike, forcing the first prince to activate her Dragonslayer state and exuding bloodlust. This ravishing bloodlust stuns her, and Arwen's sword is successfully deflected by the young prince. She gets back to her starting position, panting for breath and observing the prince's sword style. As for our boy, he's barely holding it together too, as despite being a single ring user, Arwen is different from all the rest. At the same time, Idrian taps into the skill called Judgment to invoke the knight's stats, revealing her strongest and weakest skills, even her personality traits. The fact that the prince can see her level from his limited use of the skill proves that he can also take her down. Budget Gilgamesh on a diet unleashes his crimson aura, prompting the knight to do the same. Both fighters lunge into motion, approaching the other at chaotic speeds and marking the start of the real battle. Several minutes later, both warriors are fatigued in the climax of their duel. It's an equal fight, so Balorhard intervenes and calls off the match for the day, postponing it for tomorrow. The prince acts cocky, stating that he was about to end things. Even Arwen mocks him, saying the same. Both of them are arrogant and want to continue the duel, but Balorhard isn't about to sit here all day long and believes both of them need to get treated. The healer comes up to patch up our boy's injuries, but Idrian's too busy glaring at Arwen, who shows equal distaste for him in return. The two turn the opposite direction, sharing the same thought of not losing to the other. The second day ends up in the same stalemate, and on the third day, both warriors refuse to give up. Arwen's pretty skilled, so the fact that the prince lasted this long shows that he's skilled too. Before round 3 starts, Idrian shares something he's been meaning to tell her. She wonders if he's about to apologize, refusing such an event. After all, her pride was wounded as a knight and she wants to reclaim it properly. Though it's admirable, the prince never thought of an apology in the first place. Instead, he suggests the idea of placing a reward since both of them are refusing to back down. The reward is simple. The loser will grant the winner one wish, a wish of any kind, no matter the length. The knights quickly jump to reverse this decision, believing it's far too dangerous for a prince of the royal family to make such claims. Idrian shuts them up and asks for Arwen's opinion. The knight highlights her position as one of the knights of the royal family, which is why she couldn't accept such a condition normally. At the same time, now that she's being granted full opportunity to get her chance, she's happy to take the bet. Idrian loves her choice and meets her for round 3. Both fighters chaotically swing their swords, hoping to break the other's spirit first. It's here that Idrian ends up using a move so bashful and fast that it stumps the prodigious knight. She can't believe how fast he's gotten in the span of a single day, as if he was always hiding his true strength. The fighters clash relentlessly, dancing across the arena. Only this time, the tables have been switched. Prince Idrian is the one dominating the battlefield and pushing her back, even going as far as to scratch her face. Refusing to stop, the prince gets right up in her face in what is supposed to be a decisive attack. Basically, his sword swing is faster than her ability to defend it. Both weapons clash. One sword goes flying into the air, shattered. The knight is on her knee as the spectators bear witness to the victor of the match. Arwen is unable to accept the outcome, while the prince decisively claims victory over Arwen Kurgayan. As for his reward, it's simple. Prince Idrian Leonberg wants to own her, but not in the Gunnar way, don't worry. Karl's earned the position of the royal guard for the first prince. The job was actually easy, despite the arrogance of the prince. There weren't any tantrums then, and looking at him now, Karl recalls the sheer training that the crown prince did even in the storm. His dedication resulted in complete obliteration of the dummy, and he saw back then an ecstatic thirst for combat on his face. It was at that time that the royal guard knew that Idrian was destined for greatness. Back to the current situation, the rest of the guards are all horrified, including Karl's. Owning someone is heinous, especially a knight. Arwen questions if that's what the prince truly desires. Our boy confirms, adding that she's currently just an apprentice knight who couldn't beat a mere scoundrel prince. So that's why, what he wants from her right now is the full potential of the knight called Arwen Kurgayan. Luckily, this clarification set a better tone and surprised her, while Idrian declared his intention of keeping a loyal knight. One that doesn't just guard him out of royal responsibility, but a knight that is loyal to him through thick and thin. Thanks to his scanning ability, he can foretell Arwen's exceptional talent in sword mastery, which is why his decision to own Arwen as a knight stands true. Now let's explore her own backstory. As a younger version of Arwen longed to become a knight. She was among the best of the best for her age, and despite her talents, no one would give her the recognition she deserved. So she worked even harder, twice as hard to beat every opponent in every fight. After defeating every single apprentice member she knew, she boasted astounding results. Even after everything she did, they couldn't recognize her as a proper knight. However, right now, she's being shown proper appreciation. She's being given credit, a potential and a future promised by the first prince himself. She almost doesn't believe his words, so she begs Idrian to promise one thing, and that is to treat her as a knight first and a woman second. If Idrian can do that, she will obey his every command. It's an admirable task. The two of them meet eye to eye as Idrian accepts the offer. Immediately, the same prodigious knight takes a knee before her acknowledged prince, swearing herself to Idrian Leonberg for life. The spectators watching are stunned by the event, and to answer her properly, the first prince officially honors her as a knight. He spouts the prayer that reminds me of that one scene from Game of Thrones when Jaime offers knightship to Brienne of Tarth. In the next scene, we have Arwen training relentlessly. Her fellow colleagues can't believe that she swore loyalty to such a scoundrel prince. Many of them spread nasty rumors, wondering if she has some kind of creepy relationship with the prince in secrecy, using her as a mistress while keeping her as a knight as a cover. All of these stupid rumors are starting to annoy the heck out of our boy, who still can't escape his shitty reputation like Lloyd Frontera. Everyone treats him like the scum of the earth, and watching the prince's helplessness, the royal guard calls out to him for Idrian's words from that day. On the final day of the duel, Idrian declared that he didn't yearn for a knight who guarded him for royal responsibility. His words clearly impacted Karl's deep down, but even then our boy confirms that he strongly stands by what he said. After all, if the crown assigned Karl's to a different position, he would have to abide by it instead of remaining loyal to the prince. To put him at ease, he assures Karl's that he can make an oath similar to Arwen if he wants. With sincerity in the royal guard's eyes, he asks the prince if he would accept such an oath from him. Shockingly, our boy declines it, believing that he has no interest in Karl's or the joy of nurturing him. It's a simple comment, but our boy is actually serious about what he said. Anyway, Idrian gets an official notice from the royal family, releasing him from probation period and granting him entrance in the upcoming banquet. The surprising part? The probation was lifted nearly 2 months sooner than it was due, so despite the initial anger of the king, something caused him to change his decision. The prince has no clue what's going on in that man's head, and he honestly doesn't care about the probation period ending. After all, he wasn't really planning on leaving the palace anyway, so it barely affects him. One maid intriguingly reads something that catches Idrian's attention. It's a new invitation that arrived for the first prince. She hands him the note, prompting him to open up and read its contents. The event is supposed to be a social party between young lords, a club that the scoundrel prince often frequented in the past. The maid describes it as an incomprehensible place full of defiling acts, basically implying booze and women. Our boy doesn't want to continue down that route, so Idrian slams a rejection to a useless gathering. But then, he reads the back of the note. The letter comes from Bernardo of the Eli family, his supposed friend, a name that actually jogs his memory. From his uncle, Idrian remembers that the Eli family was strongly supportive of the mana heart usage and eventually fell to ruin a century back. Out of curiosity for his friend's family, the prince decides to take part in the event, deep down hoping that his friend's family hasn't fully collapsed yet. 4 months after his possession of Idrian Leonberg's body, the young prince managed to lose a ton of weight. He had a tailor make a special outfit fitting his style, keeping it minimal. The stunning part? Our boy finally lost his fat weight and was now looking like a model instead of a bowling ball. Even the prince is shocked by his own developments, while his tailor is swooned. He lets him handle the second outfit for the palace as well. However, he asks him to wait for a bit as his measurements might change again. In the next scene, the prince is on his way to attend the social gathering event. Idrian knows that he's in a shitty position to always be attended by guards and carriage members. It's an overwhelming experience when suddenly he notices a scar on his maid's neck. Apparently, it's because of her incompetence. She did something, and the bastard fat prince punished her for it. Idrian genuinely despises the old prince for traumatizing the people. Despite seeing her around several times, he never even asked the maid her name. So he directly asks and learns that it's actually Adelia Bayern. The mention of the Bayern family clicks in Idrian's head, as it is barely even noted on the noble registry. In the past, when not even cities existed, there were several races flourishing aside from humans. Mankind was robbed and killed for being weak, but there came an era where humans became the saviors of their own fate at the end of the Great War, rising as the strongest species on the continent. The most notable among them were called the Five Electors, and of those 5 heroes, one of them wielded the sword Gruhorn, a woman who stared down a horde of titanic monsters, questioning what she and her loyal sword would be doing after the war ended. She leaped into battle to fiercely behead Ida, the king of the giants, with a single sword slash. Killing him marked the end of an era of exploitation, earning her the name of the iron-blooded sword marquise, Agnes Bayern. She was one of a kind who cursed out monsters and slashed the shit out of him, dropping F-bombs in every sentence, making combos out of swear words and rapping them faster than Eminem. Even Gruhorn at the time felt discomfort by that woman's cuss words. Bro is traumatized by the mere memory of her, but he's stunned that her descendant is sitting before his eyes. It makes him wonder what became of the Bayern family to be reduced to a lower rank. Anyway, Carl shares that they've arrived at the destination. Our boy gets out of the carriage and intends to have a proper conversation with Adelia later, confusing the maid and his royal guard. Outside, a silver-haired man welcomes his beloved old friend. This is Bernardo of the Eli family, who expresses deep gratitude for the prince and his transformation. Strangely, Idrian notices something interesting, inviting Bernardo's curiosity. Our boy assures him that it's a good idea that he came, since tonight will be very entertaining. In the next scene, they're at the club where drunk hooligans are muttering and teasing each other in delight. The party's full on the spot, but Bernardo is shocked by the prince's behavior. The same scoundrel typically gets drunk and starts flirting, but this time, he's staying silent. The very aura around Idrian is different from before. In fact, when one drunk guy comes up to mention the rumors of his victory over Arwen, bro doesn't even say a word. The whole party starts talking about his spectacular victory, and these creepy men are curious to wonder how gorgeous Arwen must look underneath her armor. Composed in his response, he asks the man if he has any siblings with him. The man reveals that he has a younger sibling, bringing much relief to the prince. Why? Because bro wants to end this bastard's life and throws a punch so hard that it sends the dude flying. The scene is tense, sobering everyone on the spot in fear and shock, even Bernardo. Idrian is ecstatic that this guy has a brother, because he can happily now stomp this guy's eggs without bringing an end to his family's legacy. The man screams like a bitch, while our cold and majestic prince declares his younger brother as the new heir of the family. The beatdown only continues as Idrian's bloodbath horrifies the crowd. The beaten-up man doesn't even understand why he's being used as a punching bag. Using this as an opportunity to educate everyone, the prince emphasizes that he won't tolerate being treated like a scoundrel, even if he's perceived as one. Bro's Shakespearean words confuse the shit out of the party. To clarify what he means, Idrian launches another punch because they do the talking much better than his words. After smashing the first guy with a billion Mike Tyson punches, he calls for Bernardo, who literally gets on his knees instantly. Bro does not want to end up like this guy. The prince even scarily reminds him of his earlier statement that he'll make today quite entertaining. Bernardo has no clue what the hell happened to this guy, and receives an order to summon the royal knights. He takes off at rocket speed to fulfill the order, while the rest of the party members simply gaze at the prince in silence. Adrian calls out the women at the back to leave, inviting the attention of a certain man. This guy tries to sneak his way out, but Adrian notices his presence. He's fine with letting this guy leave alongside the woman, so long as he can rip this dude's balls off like what he did earlier. The very thought paralyzes all the men in fear because, let's be honest, there's no worse threat than your balls getting curb-stomped until the eggs break. Adrian tells them that they were disrespecting him earlier by refusing to kneel before him, even mocking him and insulting his knight. To offer fitting charges and punish these men for the consequence of berating royalty, he has brought royal guards, specifically Carl's, who dubs them as treasonous individuals. With a single order, the royal guards are pleased to force them all in. Adrian excitedly gives the order, ensuring no one escapes punishment. After this encounter, the prince is called before the king for another ravenous attempt at creating chaos. 14 noble children were arrested for every possible excuse. The king is pissed that his son invoked the royal family's authority and brought punishment upon the victims' families. But with 14 families involved, the king will face severe backlash. Adrian knows his father well and calls out his exact fear before highlighting that all these people are outcasts and irredeemable trash anyway. In fact, he recommends his father to send a letter to certain individuals, specifically the brothers and sisters of the arrested scumbags. Hearing the boy's words, the king orders him to leave, to which the prince does without any worry. Now let's go back to his appointment with his maid. Despite his best efforts to comfort Adelia, the poor girl is breaking apart in tears, questioning what she did that was so wrong. She's like a puppy who was tortured by the old prince to the point of ruin. Her family isn't even on the list of proper nobles. Not even the descendants of the Leonberg family seem to know about the significance of the Bayerns. It's as if a part of history was erased. The peerless contribution from Agnes Bayern is no longer a thing to remember. Everything finished from the Bayern family. And yet, our boy can clearly see latent potential in Adelia's swordsmanship. This woman is a secret S rank with a crazy level of traits imbued in her. For starters, Butcher is a trait that activates upon seeing blood. War Maniac is another trait signifying a woman obsessed with battle. At the same time, the maid has fragile heart and caregiver traits, making her an excellent and passive person. So this maid has unrivaled swordsmanship and combat prowess, but not a single one of her traits can control her once she's gone mad. It comes to a point where even our boy is contemplating the idea of unleashing her carnage upon the world. In the end, it would be a waste not to try, since she's an S-rank talent. Let's talk about the slave mentality trait, which basically means a servant feels loyal and happy to serve her master. Using that as leverage, Adrian demands her to swear absolute loyalty to her. It's a confusing request because she's already her maid, but Adrian clarifies that he wants something more. He wants her to become his knight, and wants her to do so right now. The shy and fragile girl breaks down, refusing to take on such a grand role, believing herself to be insignificant. But our boy knows the truth about her family, and assures her that he'll take responsibility for her. Instead, she has to swear loyalty to him and serve without question. The strategy here is that if Adelia can't control her madness by her own abilities, then he'll outsource that control to him. At first, she wonders if he'll go to the end of his deal to take responsibility for her family. The prince's confirmation makes her really happy, as our boy even offers to summon them to the capital so she can see them anytime. This makes her really happy, enough for her to swear her loyalty. So just like Arwen, she chants it and declares her service to the first prince for the rest of her life. Adrian is happy with this arrangement and officially dubs her as a servant who will obey his orders without question. He even pats her on the hand, casting joy on her face. But even the prince is at edge, wondering if he made the correct decision here. Adrian thinks about all the rumors swirling through the palace ever since he took over this body. People whisper about every move he makes, about how quiet and unstable he seems. They talk about how the spoiled prince before him used to summon children of high-ranking nobles, beat them, and throw them into dungeons for fun. Then there is the newest scandal, the one everyone loves the most, how he appointed a lowly maid as his personal knight, someone who had never even held a sword before. Adrian knows that no matter what he does, people will hate him because of the reputation left behind by the body's previous owner. Even the maid he chose as his knight is twisted into another ugly rumor, with people claiming he is building a harem under his command. More than anything, he hates how everyone feels entitled to his life and his choices. He never expected this single decision, turning a maid into a knight, to turn into such a massive storm. It feels like everyone is waiting for him to fail. He imagines his father, the king, growing angry and saying that he is once again cleaning up his son's mess. He can already hear his uncle cursing his name like always, and he pictures his younger brother mocking him, acting clever and superior. Adrian sinks deeper into these thoughts, weighed down by frustration and dread. Then another maid rushes in and announces that the queen has arrived. Adrian panics instantly. his heart jumping as he silently begs the gods to show him mercy and give him just a little break. Adrian is exhausted from all the arguing and the constant attention, and then his mother adds more fuel to it. She scolds him, saying she truly believed he had fixed his behavior, but now it looks like he is falling back into his old trashy habits. She declares that it is time for him to step into society properly and get married. Once he chooses a spouse, she says he will finally settle down and stop wandering around like a madman. Adrian does not even understand what she is talking about, but the queen does not care. She raises her voice like any furious mother and orders him to listen, because a mother is always right. Since she has decided that it is time for him to marry, then he will marry. With that, she turns around and leaves, abandoning Adrian in shock as he stands there wondering what he is even supposed to do next. Later, Adrian summons the maid Adelia, who is clearly nervous and terrified as she sits before the prince. He explains a few things to her, and she timidly asks if she is truly going to gain mana. Adrian calmly confirms that she will receive a special kind of mana, a mana heart. He then uses his own mana and forms a heart inside her body, thinking about how this world has forgotten the legendary Sword Queen. At least he has not forgotten her. He remembers every detail, the path she walked, the way the sword moved as if it were alive in her hands, and how she commanded it with absolute grace. He wants to awaken that same destiny inside Adelia, because he believes this path belongs to her. He even remembers the powerful rhythm of the Sword Queen's mana heart, as it once beat with pride and resolve. The mana heart finally takes shape inside Adelia, and a system notification confirms that the imprint is complete and stable. Adelia watches a soft golden light glow from her chest, completely stunned. She whispers in disbelief, asking if that is truly the power of mana. When the process ends, Adrian explains that what she witnessed is the refinement method for forming a mana heart. He tells her to practice it on her own whenever she can. Suddenly, Adelia grows anxious, but her worry shifts when Adrian collapses to the ground, scraping his knees. The strain of creating a mana heart has drained him completely. She rushes toward him, but he refuses her help, brushing it off and saying he is only a little tired. Adelia hesitates, then quietly asks how someone like him could choose a lowly maid like her. Adrian has no patience left for questions and tells her to leave. When she does not move, he turns back and asks why she is staring at him like a lost puppy. Adelia quickly bows her head, mixing fear with respect, and swears that she will serve him with absolute loyalty for the rest of her life. The answer satisfies Adrian. He reminds her to never forget that he is her master, and Adelia takes those words as a badge of honor. Yet as Adrian turns away, Adelia quietly thinks to herself that she might not remember that promise quite the way he expects. A few days later, Cals comes to report to the prince about Bernardo Ely. He explains that he recently heard Bernardo has been taken by the royal guard as a witness in a recent incident, and according to official orders, strict measures are in place so no one can meet him before the trial. Adrian feels puzzled that trials even exist in this world, and he casually asks whether he will need to attend one as well. His knight calmly replies that royalty never stands as a witness. The relief hits Adrian like a released breath, but it also makes him uneasy. He realizes they are suddenly making a very big deal out of this entire trial. During the conversation, Adrian's attention drifts toward Adelia. He looks at her directly and asks how she has been feeling lately. The poor girl freezes in surprise, clearly not expecting his concern. Adrian then asks her about the mana, whether it has stabilized or not. Adelia gathers herself and answers that it has. Hearing that, Adrian stands up without hesitation and declares that from now on she will join him during training. He tells her to go change and meet him at the training ground and to leave the cleaning rag behind because from this moment onward, she is a knight. At the training ground, Adrian begins stretching his body, slow and relaxed. Before he can settle into his routine, someone interrupts him. It is his uncle, Belhard. He asks a question, and Adrian responds with sharp sass, clearly uninterested in dealing with him today. His attention is focused elsewhere, on a girl struggling to run across the field. Adrian asks his uncle if he has heard the rumors, then openly states that he is turning her into a knight. The words immediately anger Belhard, as always. He lashes out, accusing Adrian of recklessly forcing a maiden into knighthood and wasting his time on foolish ideas. Adrian snaps back, telling him to stop meddling in his affairs like he always does. Their argument grows louder, sharp words flying back and forth, until Adelia finally completes her 10th lap and collapses onto the ground. Belhard does not spare her a glance. Adelia, breathless and shaking, starts apologizing, begging forgiveness for being such a poor runner. Adrian immediately tells her to forget it. He steps forward and places a wooden sword in her hands, explaining that today he will teach her only the basic stances. He demonstrates a few simple movements, steady and precise, then asks Adelia to try them herself. What happens next freezes everyone in place. Like a skilled ballet dancer, Adelia begins to move. Her steps flow smoothly, her posture perfect, her sword following each motion with surprising grace. Both Belhard and Adrian stand still, staring in disbelief, as she flawlessly recreates his techniques after watching them only once. When she finishes, she looks at him and softly asks if she did it correctly. Adrian feels a chill crawl up his spine. For the first time, fear grips him. At this rate, she might surpass him far too soon. He thinks bitterly that control only works when the weak fear the strong, and if she grows beyond him, she could become dangerous. But his thoughts break when he notices Belhard watching Adelia with a greedy glint in his eyes. Adrian steps closer and nudges his uncle, warning him to calm himself and not entertain any filthy ideas about her. Belhard only smirks and mocks him, saying that Adrian is still a novice who has held a sword for only a few months, and that someone like him cannot handle such overwhelming potential. That is where Adrian draws the line. He refuses to be talked down to. His mana heart surges to life, the same heart that holds the depth of the giant king, the light dragon, and beings who drank deeply from the blood of countless lives. A portion of his soul answers his anger and rises at his command. Red flames wrap around his body as his presence explodes outward. He stares at Belhard with cold authority, his voice heavy and final as he declares that Adelia belongs to him. Adrian warns his uncle not to look at Adelia, or even think about her, because he truly hates it when someone tries to force what does not belong to them. In that moment, he suddenly realizes that his sense of reality is slipping away. His awareness fades into a strange state filled with cold and darkness, where he can feel neither life nor death. He understands the danger immediately. At this rate, his body will merge with the sword, and his soul will be devoured by the demonic blade, Blackhorn. Adrian knows he cannot allow that to happen. He fights back against the pull, confronts his inner demons, and forces the demonic power back into its cage. Slowly, he returns to himself as Prince Adrian, just in time to catch the end of his uncle's speech. The uncle speaks grandly about how one ordinary knight can save the lives of 10,000 soldiers, and how a single outstanding knight can protect hundreds more. Adrian barely listens. To him, his uncle is no longer just family, but the great frontier commander, the man who leads armies among corpses and war. Even so, Adrian has no interest in the lecture. His indifference irritates the uncle once again, and he begins to lash out at the boy. That is when Adelia finally speaks for herself. She declares that her body and soul belong to Adrian, and that she will not follow the uncle's words. Adrian feels a spark of pride at her resolve and smirks toward his uncle. He calmly says that his original goal for the training was simply to help her lose weight, and now that she has come this far, he has nothing more to teach. He tells his uncle to leave and stop interfering in his business. The uncle storms away, stern and clearly irritated. Even after that day, he continues to visit the palace without stopping, watching Adelia and observing their training from a distance. Since Adrian has strictly forbidden him from stepping in or interfering, the uncle can do nothing but watch. Seeing that arrogant man struggle in silence becomes strangely entertaining for Adrian. Before long, Adelia once again takes her stance with the sword, and Adrian can hardly believe his eyes. She has already learned the sword's renaissance. He applauds her, genuinely pleased with her progress, and for the first time, Adelia herself looks proud. The peaceful moment does not last long. The uncle interrupts again and demands to know whether Adrian has taught her the mana heart as well. When Adrian confirms it, the uncle's anger explodes. He starts shouting, accusing Adrian of teaching her foolish travel tricks instead of keeping them to himself. Adrian turns sharply and orders him to leave at once. The uncle curses him, claiming there was a far better path, and that Adelia had potential beyond imagination, which Adrian has now ruined. Adrian remains calm and tells his bodyguard to escort the uncle out. The uncle refuses to be touched by a lowly guard and storms out on his own. After the tension fades, Adelia quietly asks Adrian if the techniques she is learning are really just petty tricks. Adrian firmly denies it. He tells her that his uncle does not understand what he is talking about. The truth, he explains, is that people of this modern era have completely forgotten what a real mana heart truly is. If they had not, they would never have thrown it away like a pair of broken shoes. With quiet certainty, Adrian vows that she will soon discover the true power of mana. Later at the training ground, the uncle returns and places a wooden sword in front of Adrian, demanding that he prove himself. The uncle declares that he will use only a single ring, and if Adrian can force him to take even half a step back, then he will finally acknowledge Adrian's knowledge and power. Adrian picks up the sword and calmly asks what the bet is. The uncle replies that if Adrian wins, he will grant him one wish, anything he wants, even the family's secret techniques. It is not what Adrian truly wants, but for now, he accepts the terms without hesitation. Adrian charges forward at once, aiming straight for his uncle's throat. The uncle only smirks and says it was obvious that Adrian would go for the neck. Just as predicted, Adrian attacks the uncle's throat again and again and again. Each strike is fast and sharp, but the uncle dodges every single one with ease. He moves effortlessly, avoiding the attacks until he finally blocks Adrian's sword and lightly nudges him back, asking if that is all he has. He then pushes Adrian away and mocks him, asking if he has already given up. Adrian grits his teeth. He is stubborn, and he finds his uncle unbearably annoying, but he cannot deny one thing. His uncle is terrifyingly strong and smart. He is waiting for the moment Adrian draws out his mana, because only then can he deliver a far more crushing defeat. But Adrian is not going to give him that satisfaction. With that thought, he starts speaking to himself. finding it strange how 400 years ago there were countless mana hearts, and knights who possessed a mana heart achieved unbelievable feats. Yet when a somewhat useful skill appeared later, everyone simply forgot about the mana heart and adapted that new skill instead. Over time, people began to believe that the mana chain technique was a far superior method of mana management than the mana heart. Belhard hears him muttering and asks what exactly he is trying to say. Idrian calmly replies that he disagrees with that belief entirely, and that the comparison itself is flawed. Idrian says it was never that the mana heart was weak, it was always that the owner was weak. He states clearly that not all mana hearts are fragile or inferior. He then asks Belhard if he has ever heard of the heroic martial poem. Belhard snaps at him to stop talking, saying that the training ground is a place for trading blows and swords, not a place for songs and poems. Idrian only smirks and tells him that he is a fool for calling the mana heart a low-level technique. With that, Idrian begins to recite the poem that is engraved deep within his chest. He sings of 100 battles won against 20 trainees who all dreamed of becoming heroic martial warriors. As the words flow, the heroic martial poem takes shape. Power begins to surge through him with every line he recites. The strength of those victories pours into his body, into his arms, and finally into his blade. Slowly, his sword begins to glow, answering the poem with its own rising light. The system notification shows that the effects of the poem of sparing have been activated, and mana flows all around Idrian, but Belhard remains unimpressed, saying that no matter what Idrian does, it will not matter. As long as Idrian relies on the mana heart, it cannot surpass mana chain. Idrian charges at his uncle, and Belhard dodges effortlessly with his sword. The mana of the ring pushes the mana heart's flow backward, causing Idrian to fly slightly back. But in truth, to master the poem, Idrian has trained over 100 times and endured the ring's mana over 1,000 times. During those 100 matches, he experienced 1,000 waves of opposing mana. He strikes down with his sword, unleashing the power of the stained Sei. His blade now feels fully presentable, but when he attacks again, Belhard dodges once more. Idrian presses on, striking repeatedly, and for the first time, Belhard begins to show concern. Belhard gathers his full power to push Idrian away. He tells Idrian he is arrogant to claim that not all mana hearts are equal. He slams his sword into the ground, causing an explosion that throws Idrian backward against the wall. Belhard announces that he is bored with this fight and declares that it is over because he has already won. Idrian, however, realizes that at a common rank, heroic martial points alone are inefficient. He uses his sword to rise to his feet and begins recounting the history from 400 years ago. He explains how the knights made a critical mistake. They left no enemies for their descendants. They believed their stories, sword techniques, six beating of the heart, and poems of their victories would pass down intact. But this new world has forgotten the songs of dragons and giant kings, turning them into myths too absurd to be true. Belhard does not listen at all. He believes Idrian is daydreaming and cannot understand a word of what he is saying. Idrian grows tired of the games and thinks of his uncle as an arrogant and foolish knight. Suddenly, the darkness of the sword's demon, Blackhorn, rises like a storm above Idrian's eyes. He declares that if Belhard does not understand true power, he will teach him. The demon hands fully consume Idrian's body and mind. He begins chanting the dragon-slaying poem. His body strains under the immense power. Some parts of the song are omitted because of his lower rank, but one powerful verse remains. Idrian repeats the mantra again and again. The sheer energy of this verse strikes Belhard with force. Idrian attacks, and Belhard realizes that if this continues, he could die. Another explosion erupts, sending Idrian flying backward into the ground. When the dust settles, Belhard reveals that he is not using a single minor ring as promised, but a full pentagon of rings. Idrian, however, is thrilled. Even with all 4 rings active, his sword is untouched, slicing through the ring's mana with the power of the mana heart. He rises to his feet, leaving Belhard stunned and confused. Belhard expected the ring's mana to surpass the mana heart, yet it could not. Idrian looks directly at his uncle and declares calmly and firmly that he has lost. Later, the dragon's song and the sword batter Idrian's frail human body. He claws at the sheets, teeth gritted, cursing that damn Gesta Sanctorum. Later, Idrian knows the pain is the price for forcefully drawing out the power of Gesta Sanctorum, the poem of the decapitated dragon. His body is now in tatters, but he knows it is worth every risk. This is his first martial feat that he wove entirely himself, and he feels proud of it. He recites the poem again and again from his heart. The system shows that his rank as god of duels has slightly increased, and he thinks it will be enough for the duel with the third prince. Suddenly, Adelia interrupts him, beaming with joy because he has finally regained consciousness. She tells him how, after he collapsed, the queen was furious at Belhard, and it was the first time she had seen her so angry. Deep down, Idrian feels a little pleased, thinking that it serves his uncle right to be scolded by the queen. Adelia also tells him that Belhard asked to be informed as soon as Idrian woke up. Idrian does not like the idea, but he lies down, telling her that he has woken up just long enough to know, and that he wants to rest. He knows if he does not properly recover the spirit damaged by excessive use of Gesta Sanctorum, he will pay a terrible price. Memories of realities in the past will mix into chaos, and eventually, the boundary of reality will collapse in his mind. He will become a madman, good for nothing, trapped in the sword's memories again. Even thinking about that hole makes him shudder because it is the worst fate he can imagine. Then he tells Adelia about her ancestor Agnes Bayron, a legendary swordsman, and how she should be able to inherit the powers of Gesta Sanctorum. Adelia imagines how incredible her ancestor must have been. Adrian explains that in order to fully benefit from the poem, she will need to grow far stronger than she is today. He asks her what she truly wants to learn. Adelia is stunned by the question, her eyes widening, and she hesitates, stuttering repeatedly. Finally, she blurts out her heart, declaring that she wants to become Idrian's sword. Hearing this, Idrian freezes, utterly stunned by her words. Apparently, some Gesta Sanctorum begin with the sound of a driving trumpet, while others start with the first step across a plain. Some begin with a heartfelt oath, just like the oath Adelia is taking right now in front of Idrian. She swears to sacrifice her life for him and dedicate everything she has into 5 things for his sake. The system shows that she is offering a point of subordination. Idrian feels the power and presence of it, realizing that this is Adelia's Gesta Sanctorum. Some Gesta Sanctorum also influence others, and in this case, a new Gesta Sanctorum forms, creating a point of domination. The point of subordination is a link between a master and a servant, and Idrian is stunned. The descendant of the Sword Queen has conceived this form of subordination in front of him, granting him a miracle he never expected. He smiles, thinking of all the powers he will now have. As long as Adelia's subordination targets him, her growth will also benefit his own work. He thanks her for her kindness, and Adelia gazes at him in admiration. Adrian does not yet know what kind of help or advantage she will give him, but he feels certain about the future. A few days later, Adrian is in the kingdom, bored out of his mind. His mother approaches him, asking if he is feeling a little better. Adrian does not like being questioned, and he struggles dealing with people who are cherished by the body's original owner. He is just as awkward with his mother, who looks somewhat defeated. She asks if he resents his uncle and then tries to cover for him, saying that he does not truly mean harm, so even if Adrian has hard feelings, he should just shake them off. When Adrian replies that he does not feel that way, she screams that he definitely should. Adrian is confused, wondering what she really wants from him. Ever since he blew away his pride and arrogance that day, it has been hard for him to endure. That day, he planted a heart demon inside his uncle's mind. If Belhard cannot overcome it, the demon will grow, and he will lose his proud martial powers. Adrian does not care about the consequences for his uncle. That will be his own loss. His mother says that his uncle has spent his whole life closer to swords than anyone else, which makes him clumsy and rough in mind. But recently, Belhard seems fond of Idrian and even personally persuaded the king to lift his confinement early. As soon as it was lifted, Idrian threw a temper tantrum, putting his uncle in a difficult position. Adrian realizes then that his uncle had legitimate reasons to be angry, yet he still acts like a spoiled, ungrateful brat, thinking, what did he even do for him? While in recovery, an old scholar named Niccolo Marciadel was called in to serve as his tutor. Naturally, Adrian Leonberger refused to play along. The old scholar, Carls, and Adelia watched as the prince rolled around the floor, throwing a tantrum. Niccolo tried to give him some encouraging words, but the spoiled prince took it the wrong way. Once he calmed down a little, Adrian insisted that there's no need for a lesson when he already knows everything he needs to know. Since he feels strongly in that way, Niccolo suggested an alternative. They could just hang out and engage in a conversation covering several topics. If he could prove that he didn't need help, the scholar promised never to visit again. By the end of the day, the prince was blazing with passion as he openly took part in academic debates about the nature of man. Niccolo even suggested a book for him to peruse based on the topic they delved into. In this text, the relationship between ruler and subject was represented as a kind of contract. Monarchs provide a portion of military and economic power to the keys of power, and the keys of power keep the monarch on the throne through loyalty. For all the years he's lived as Gruhan, Adrian came to believe that relationships are supposed to be give and take. Before he knew it, the whole day had been spent. The old scholar tidied up the desk and concluded the session. When Niccolo said his goodbyes, the prince was smiling from ear to ear. He's never had so much fun just yapping away. As soon as he heard the door shut, Adrian realized what happened. He had just been finessed into attending a full-blown lecture against his will. The old man was quite sly, but Niccolo was also surprised by the first prince. The kid was very different from how the rumors depicted him. Forbidden from training and free from Niccolo's lessons, the prince's schedule was clear for the day, and he was bored. Before he could agonize about his life choices and bed rot, a guest, namely his uncle Bale Balerhard, made him stand up. Adelia welcomed Unk in. It's been a few days since the last sparring match. Bale looked ghastly. He hasn't been able to overcome the inner demon planted by his nefarious nephew. Today, Unk only came by to say his apologies. He broke the promise he made to himself and caused the prince a great injury for it. He won't make any excuses, even though Adrian's injuries were the painful fruits of overexertion. His uncle must have been agonizing over the troubles of injuring royalty. To correct his mistakes, Uncle Bale offered to give the kid anything he could possibly ask for. If he has to give up his eyes or arms to settle the score, he will. In the end, Adrian felt bad for this talented man trapped by such a trivial inner demon and decided to be generous. The first prince stated his demand. He just wanted to go out for a bit. His forced confinement period is over, so he should be free to go. But the prince wasn't talking about going on a one-day trip. He plans to wander far outside the capital. Setting the schedule will take time, and they can't aim for somewhere too far either. Bale accepted his request and immediately got to work to make it happen. After his uncle left, the prince was left in the room with Carls. He thought the boss would demand something more unreasonable. You don't get the favor of a count every day after all. Frankly, Adrian just wanted the old man to stop acting so stiff and pathetic, so he asked for something manageable. Hearing the boss speak so candidly cracked up the night. Suddenly, Adelia entered the room with a much-awaited letter in hand. It was a neat update log from Lady Arwen Kurgayan. She underwent a small breakthrough and will be able to visit soon. The message was short and sweet, a perfectly timed piece of good news. 5 days later, Uncle Bale sent word that everything had been taken care of. After 2 more days, the day of the departure arrived. The first fief they'll be passing through is called Ellen. The prince was so excited, he couldn't sit his ass down. You see, the county of Elin is the royal palace's best armament production site. It has an iron mine to supply high-quality material and a blacksmith's guild to refine it. More than half of the weapons and armors delivered to the royal family came from Elin. Since Adrian's level has risen a lot lately, he's been itching to find a new blade of his own. Originally, he planned to pick up a nice sword from the royal armory. Unfortunately, he was blocked by a royal order from the king. Considering how the fat prince was moving, he couldn't really blame his father. At least he can score a proper weapon outside the palace. Surprisingly, Unk was taking the excursion seriously. Thus, the approximately 20-day journey had begun. 3 days from the capital, they'll reach the first stop, Elin. Afterwards, they'll venture for another 2 days toward the Iron Lion Castle. Currently, Adrian is stuck sitting inside a carriage for 3 whole days, bored out of his mind. Adelia is sitting across from him, but she's no fun either. Maybe his time would be better spent checking on his mana heart instead. Currently, his tank is empty as a side effect of overstraining the use of the dragon-slaying poem. It should be safe to start filling it up again slowly. He sensed the rattling vibration of the carriage, the cold draft of the wind, and the chatter of knights, and gathered the specks of mana born from those things. Eventually, he was able to reform and fill his empty mana heart. Much to his surprise, the mana heart he conjured was much bigger than the last. This is just a small glimpse of the greater will. It is the influence of forcing himself to use the poem. His physical constitution underwent a qualitative change, expanding his mana heart and improving its ability to store more juice. Through unconventional means, he reached the level of sword expert, improving his connection with the source and lifting the restriction for some of his authorities. His third eye and third ear have been upgraded significantly. Overall, a single meditation session pushed him to a different level. He could feel the drastic change in every little movement. He's taken another step forward. After those long 3 days of carriage riding, the caravan finally reached Elin. The first prince was respectfully welcomed and personally escorted by Edgar and Torrance Elin, sons of the city lord. In consideration of their long journey, Edgar offered to guide everyone to their rooms first. Walking around the Elin mansion, Adrian saw why this county was dubbed the production center for armaments. The halls were filled with all sorts of weapons. Upon closer look, you'd see that the blades in display are just flashy pieces, useless hunks of metal in actual combat. Based on first impressions, Adrian felt doubtful about finding what he was looking for in this place. So, he asked to be taken to the blacksmith guild within the territory. Edgar gladly granted his request. On the way, the local lord warned the prince that blacksmiths are rough and stubborn people without exception. When completely immersed in their work, they won't notice even if the lord visits. Edgar gave Adrian a long preamble to respect the craftsman's spirit, even if it might seem a tad offensive. The heat of the furnace is intense as they walk into the room where magic happens. The air was filled with the noise of iron being forcefully hammered. The flames clamor, the bellows hiss. The blacksmiths use fire and iron in perfect harmony. Among the artisans in this room, there is one exceptionally clear sound that took the prince's breath away. An old man diligently forging a sword in the middle of the room caught Adrian's undivided attention. For some reason, every rhythmic beat of the hammer reminded Adrian of his first memory as Gruhan. Adelia wiped the sweat off her lord's cheek, knocking the prince out of his nostalgic daydream. While the rest of the forge had stopped working to offer their humble greetings to the prince, the old man continued his focused efforts. Edgard introduced the man leading the welcome committee as Saxon, head of the blacksmith guild. Adrian didn't give a damn. All he wanted to do was watch the forging masterclass in front of him. Saxon tried to curry favor with royalty and yelled at the old man to stop working and show some respect to the prince. Adrian had to grab that son of a bitch by the mouth to stop him from messing things up. Based on the empty workbenches and uncomfortable looks he was getting from the other blacksmiths, it looks like the head of the guild dragged everyone out without being asked to do so. As a sign of respect, he implored the blacksmiths to get back to work. With everyone back in their rightful stations, the prince locked in and continued watching absolute cinema. He just stood there, watching a shirtless old man beat his hammer into some hot steel repeatedly. The prince was completely engrossed by the process. He was in the midst of a burning world. For all the years of his existence, he's never felt this sensation before. After they left the forge, Edgar explained that the old man had been repeatedly forging and melting the same sword for the past half year. Every sword the man forged is said to be a masterpiece. He's not called the master artisan for nothing. None of his creations lacked in quality, yet he melted them all down the same. Furthermore, for the past month, the old man barely slept. He has devoted himself completely to his work. Given his age, it's a bit worrisome. Several days after they reached Elin, the prince made visiting the forge early and leaving late at night a regular occurrence. He just watched the master artisan continue the intense daily routine in silence. Contrary to the tension caused by the first prince's arrival, he caused no incidents at all. His stay in Elin eventually reached its last day. On the day of departure, the master artisan was going harder than usual. The prince was hoping to stay until he could see the final product, but who knows how long that will take. He can only leave with a deep sense of regret. There are countless matters to attend to. On the eve of their departure, Adrian commanded his people to prepare a farewell banquet. After the banquet, Edgar came running to his door first thing in the morning. He was excitedly yelling about the master artisan's finished sword. Hyped as hell, the prince ran towards the forge and saw the old man holding a majestic weapon. He was gently cleaning the edges of his newest deadly creation. Once it was 100% clean and sharp, the master artisan willingly surrendered the weapon to the prince. Looking at the blade, Adrian could visualize the words that perfectly encapsulated the moment. It was a weapon heated like the sun rising on the horizon, and it cooled until its hue matched the royal crimson robes. A sword akin to the sun, and the king was born. When it came to naming the sword, the artisan suggested the moniker Damarung. To the artisan, it means twilight. To the prince, it shall be the dawn. Once the weapon was surrendered to its rightful owner, exhaustion quickly caught up with the old man. Before he could collapse on the floor, the prince caught the master artisan. Sensing the weak pulse in the old man's body, Adrian decided to spend one more night in Elin. On his deathbed, the old man recounted the moment he saw the prince watch him work. On that first day, the sword took shape in his mind as if guided by fate. The sword itself chose the day it would be born. Knowing that the artisan was already on the way to the afterlife, Gruhan decided to be truthful and spilled his secret. Surprisingly, the old man took the revelation quite well. A blacksmith and a former sword can understand each other's hearts best. As his final request, the artisan extended his quivering hand and asked to hold the last sword he forged for one moment. Holding the handle, he blessed the sword to be as great as its owner once was. Adrian promised that it would be, and the old man finally croaked. When the sun came up, Edgar came running back to the prince's tent to glaze the new sword, Damarung, a blade forged with one's very soul. He tried to convince the prince that the old man's sword was not suitable for wielding, and that he should use a magic sword instead. Though not top tier, the magic sword presented by Edgard was at least a fine mid-grade. Seeing through Edgar's scheme, the prince shamelessly took the magic sword and refused to give up Damarung. To make sure that he won't get pushback, he made sure to pressure Edgar using the Elin family's loyalty to the crown. All the sly noble could do was swallow the loss and play it cool. He planned to lure the prince with a flashy magic sword in exchange for the master's blade, only to end up giving away two precious weapons for free. With no more delays, the caravan rolled out. The cavalry rode ahead at full speed while the carriages and infantry followed at a measured pace. To make up for the delays, they must hurry. On the way up to his carriage, the prince bumped into Uncle Bale. They barely saw each other the entire time they were in Elin since Bale was busy with a separate task. From now on, they'll be riding hard to reach Iron Lion Fortress by nightfall. Funnily enough, the prince doesn't know how to ride a horse. He was a literal sword for God knows how long, so how would he know how to ride a horse? The road to Iron Lion Castle was messy. He had to learn how to ride on the way. There were lots of puking, crazy horse wheelies, and very preventable twists and turns. Even if it wasn't the half-day journey originally planned, they managed to reach the destination in roughly a full day's ride. The prestige of the Iron Lions from the House of Wolroden was embodied by the welcome party arranged to receive the noble scion of Leonberger. These lions were a lot more spirited than expected. The reason was obvious. These boys must not be happy that their goddess was snagged away by a wastrel prince. Thinking that it would be fun to provoke the lions, Adrian confidently walked towards Arwen. Once face to face, the honorable knight bent her knee and gave the most respectful greeting to her lord. The Iron Lions almost pounced on the first prince right then and there. Their reaction was quite immediate, but so was Adelia Byrne's. If Adelia loses her bearings to hostility at this moment, it would be bad news. The prince had to snap her out of boiling, murderous rage. It's a good thing he's been developing her subservience constantly. He turned back to Arwen and invited the Thorny Rose to follow him somewhere else. There are many stories they haven't shared yet. It would be better if the lions behind her tag along. The prince's first stop upon arrival was the training grounds. He was very eager to witness the Iron Lion, who are said to be the best in the kingdom, in action. Idrian issued an open challenge for anyone brave enough to step up, but his status as first prince was a bit burdensome. So, he pledged under the Leonberger name that no one would be held accountable for the results of any duels today. When coddling them didn't work, he resorted to provoking the lions. If no one crosses swords with him, the world-renowned reputation must be nothing but a bluff, right? Unable to take the trash talk any longer, Dale of the House Donant stepped up to the plate. He claimed to be far from worthy of representing the sword of the Iron Lions, but he's ready to make a stand. The prince was just glad someone actually fell for his rage bait. Dale here decided to take the initiative and charged with his wooden blade drawn. Idrian received the first exchange with a thunderous response that wrecked Dale's body from the inside out. His red head slid across the muddy floors of the training ground. One down, a lot more to go, the prince implored the knights to line up and try him. Next on the chopping block was Paul Rothheim, a third year as opposed to freshman Dale. As expected, the baby-faced knight was clobbered without a fight. Hallie, a fifth-year apprentice, thought he got the sauce. He didn't. Judith followed suit, and the prince showed him equal rights, equal fights. Every person sent by the proud Iron Lions lost in a spectacular fashion. This beatdown went on for half a day. Idrian never sustained a single scratch. After cleaning up the apprentices, the prince felt the itch to mess with the official members of the Knight Order. To stir some more trouble, he loudly announced that Arwen would be coming with him on the way home. The Thorny Rose didn't show any hesitation and accepted her lord's whim. This simple trick got one of the official members of the Iron Lions to stand up and speak. The knight had heard about the prince's love of gambling, so he suggested a small bet to liven things up. Before the knight could foolishly embarrass himself, Idrian put his foot down and established that Arwen is not a prize for a tournament. They should just wager something else instead. He threw the worn-down training sword and asked Carls for a real blade. The first prince unsheathed the magic sword and put it up on the line for a duel. Anyone with decent eyes could see that the magic sword is a treasure. Uncomfortable with the arrangement, Arwen tried to volunteer as the prize, but she is simply 1,000 times more precious than a mere sword. The value of a future swordmaster is incomparable to forged steel. Dunham of House Fahrenheit accepted the challenge. As an official Iron Lion Knight, he is on the verge of breaking through a triple chain. He's basically on double chain. His sword is the 17th blade made by the master artisan. To keep it fair, he's also willing to bet this treasured weapon in single combat. Taking this fight a little more seriously, the prince decided to use his main weapon. In his hands is the master's 100th and final work, completed only a few days ago. Dunham stoked his chains. Although he disagrees with the sword path the prince is walking on, the efforts to get there are evident. Out of respect for that, Dunham vowed to give this duel his best. Idrian will never get used to people pettily referring to his mana heart as the wrong path. He's learned that the respect directed towards him should belong to his hardworking people instead. The prince implored his knight-in-training maid, Adelia, to watch what's about to go down closely. This path is the one the two of them will be walking on. Affected by her lord's aura, Adelia unconsciously matched his frequency from the back. Without fail, she is ready to do whatever the prince wants and needs.